On this Meet the Team, I am joined by Jared Jenkins. Jared, how are you doing today? Where are you joining me from?
I'm good. Just got back from our week off, so feeling
Hmm.
very refreshed. I'm in the Chicago
Okay,
land area.
very nice. And what do you do at Chronosphere, or what is your job title? They're not always the same thing.
Yeah. I'm a member of technical staff.
Uh-huh.
We have a relatively flat software engineering organization. I work on the limits team. We're part of like the larger storage organization that works on the M3 and the control plane.
Hmm.
I like to explain that this like our customer is the central observability team. That's who we optimize for.
Okay.
Um, and the limits team, it specifically helps those observability teams manage their budgets. And informally, we own a lot of the ingestion flow.
Hmm. Just to explain that a little bit, what is the ingestion flow?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when you emit a metric when a customer emits their metric from their data center, we're responsible for making sure it gets all the way into the database.
Okay. Okay. That is, I guess, pretty helpful.
Yeah, yeah.
And what were some of the reasons you decided to come to Chronosphere? What attracted you to the company and the role?
Yeah, I would say there's like two big reasons that really helped me to decide to come here. I mean, I was kind of looking to go back to a smaller company after being at Google for
Hmm.
almost 4 years. But I think two big reasons are just scale and there's really a high bar for correctness and reliability in this
Hmm.
domain. Some of our largest customers are writing, several million metrics per second, and this just has a whole lot of challenges. I think
Yeah.
when you're in the software engineering domain, like you really have to be thoughtful about how you build things, and you don't often get this with a smaller company.
Hmm.
And I think the other reason is I think every engineer has gone through some frustration with poorly performing observability tools. It just drags your whole process down, introduces a lot of toil, outages. And so I think in many ways, it's great that we're bringing people on and a lot of our customers are getting better uptime when they make the
Hmm.
transition to Chronosphere. But I think, the challenge going forward is we still need to keep building new features and maintaining that reliability.
Okay. My next question was going to be, what did you do before? You mentioned you were at Google. What did you do at Google, if it's okay
Yeah,
to answer?
yeah, yeah. No, I worked on a team called Ads Integrity. Ads Integrity is like a
Okay.
couple hundred people, but my specific team was we worked on something. Well, the whole team in general is trying to fight abuse in the ads domain, which is
Mhm.
actually very complicated. People try to use the ads network for all kinds of like fraud and financial abuse and trademark violations and malware.
Yeah.
It's a very topical thing these days. So they spun up an entire organization around just trying to like clamp down on that problem. And the team that I worked on specifically was a infra team that built like a very big pipeline that other developers could use to build like ML models and build enforcement
Mm.
tools. But it has a lot of the same problems that observability teams have with our pipeline, right? Like
Mhm.
there are many consumers that want to put data, many teams that want to put data into a pipeline essentially and store it, and the costs can get wildly out of whack. Um, and so you really care about like building a platform that people can understand, like this team is using this much of the budget, right? They added this new thing. How do we like control that?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, it's. I guess that would be a big job too.
Yeah, it was a really cool team. Enjoyed it a lot.
Okay. I'm sure you saw some things that were you'd rather not repeat for various reasons as well, though. You would imagine the scale and the type of violations you would get would be, yeah, quite varied, shall we say,
Yep,
to put it
for sure,
lightly.
for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
Okay. And I think you touched on this a little bit in an earlier answer, but what is the most interesting technical challenge Chronosphere is tackling, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like the whole company is doing lots of really interesting work, and at this point I can't even keep up with it. but with the number of engineers and things that we're doing, it's pretty cool stuff. But I think the problem, like our specific team, like limits what we're trying to do is like I think observability today is it's just way too easy to emit data, and that's great. Like I think the most engineers are encouraged to go through like, hey, like let's add more metrics, let's add more traces, let's do this. But the problem is there's like this weird imbalance for, how valuable is that data, right?
Yeah.
And it puts a lot of burden on like the COTs, these like SREs who are trying to like basically maintain this license, right? You either have to spend more money, or spend a ton of time like hand-holding teams to get them to emit less data or to be really smart about it. And I think Google, tried to do this with Monarch and StreamZ. If you look at how Prometheus works, it looks a lot like those technologies, but they've only solved it for Google, right?
Yep.
And in some ways, they solved it a different way than we're taking it. And I think we are now trying to like give this control plane to our customers, who kind of look at the problem very differently depending on the context. So it's a very like there's a lot of like, how should the customer use this thing? But then there's also just the technical challenge of like trying to give people those tools so they can maintain their budgets.
And I suppose, when you're building something like that for Google, they have a lot of different problems, but it's just their problems. Whereas a SaaS product like Chronosphere, it's lots of different problems spread across many different people who also have different problems, et cetera, et cetera. So
and like they've got sort of a very their engineering culture is very like and processes and tools are sort of fixed at this point, right? Like they've gotten to the point where after 20 years of development, this is how you're going to do something, right? There is no other way to do it. And like, that's great. Like they figured it out, but if you look at some of our customers, they don't work that way.
Yep.
And so like, you can't just say, why don't you do it this way? It's like, well, no, they don't think of it the same way.
Yep.
So I think it's kind of fun because you have to get familiar with different businesses, and really make sure that you're building something that is useful for different use cases.
Yeah. In amongst all that client work and all the features that I think a lot of us are struggling to keep up with now because there's so many, what are you working on at the moment that excites you the most?
Yeah, I mean, so I've had my hand in quite a few things since I joined, and I think that's been kind of speaks to the size of the company, just like the amount of impact that anybody can have at a company this size. When I first started, I worked on like a first like run of label caching, which basically makes the ability to search for build queries faster, which is like something that's a big pain point for customers. And then the other thing I worked on was re-architecting our limits like servicing. So we have a service that basically controls like, are you over your quota or not? And so we went through, when we onboarded some new customers, we went through this whole process of like, how do we actually make that thing scale? So that was pretty fun. But soon I'll actually be focusing exclusively on the collector. So the collector is like effectively our agent that customers run. Like we give them software, they run it, and it allows them to collect traces and metrics. And in the near term, we're going to be focused on like making it easier for our customers to be able to debug stuff, which helps like our sales and account management folks like don't have to like handhold as much, which is really important. And also moving, I think that I'm really excited about though is like being able to bring the control plane closer to the customer as well. There's actually a lot of like cost savings that we can provide to our customers by, for instance, providing more details or the abilities to like control data flow even inside of their own data centers. So I think that's going to be really cool to be able to do that.
Watch this space.
yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Okay, so that was most of the serious questions. Let's have a couple of fun getting to know you questions. What's a fact about you, fun or interesting or otherwise, that you don't think people would guess?
Yeah. So I'm actually an Eagle Scout.
Okay.
If you're not from the States, it may not mean much, but in Boy Scouts of America, it's basically the highest award. So I spent a ton of time camping when I was a kid, and it's something that I'm really looking forward to once my kids get a little older.
Yeah.
So I kind of introduce them to that. I think it's a great experience to get outside.
Cool. And engineers, members of technical staff, developers love to keep trying cool new things. I know I've always got about 10 at once I'm trying them myself. Are there any cool new tools or frameworks or practices or anything that you've been working on recently that you would really like to share?
Yeah, I would say I'm pretty boring in this department, but I think that one thing I'm definitely getting trying to have like get more into the habit of doing is writing like local benchmarks with Golang. I think Golang has this, fantastic, um, fantastic, set of tools for benchmarking.
Mm.
It's got a wonderful standard library, and if you're writing local benchmarks is a great way to, test things out locally before you even get them into production or test environments. So it's something that I'm just trying to like be more aware of.
Yep.
Coming from different languages, you don't always have those tools just built in.
Yeah.
And so it's been pretty cool.
Yeah. Actually, it sounds, a great way of, I suppose, relieving that load on various services in the long run, because you might highlight something very early stage before forcing it on others.
The thing that I've learned over my career is like the faster you can iterate on something, the faster you can catch bugs, the cheaper it is to fix. So just building that confidence early will alleviate a lot of pain later.
Yep.
Right.
For sure. All right. Then we're going to get to some of the one of the slightly strange questions. Although you spend a lot of time outdoors, so maybe you have a very considered answer for this. If you were an animal, what would you be?
I would actually be a Shih Tzu. I used to have one.
Okay.
And I know it's a little specific, but they're just great companion dogs. They get a lot of love. I would want to be obviously a well-loved Shih Tzu. I think I would probably sleep most of the day, and I'd probably get, in this theoretical situation, I'd be getting plenty of treats.
Someone has said dog before, but you're the first one to go very specific with the dog.
Yeah, I just think they're great dogs. So That's what I would want to be.
Okay. And is there someone in your life or your career you've considered a role model for work, for your life as a whole?
Yeah. I mean, I used to work with this person, Dan Post. He was my manager at, he's now at Okta. We were at a company called Motive. Ultimately wasn't very successful. We made a heart rate tracking ring and stuff like that. I got to do a bunch of different things.
Yes. I think I remember it. Yeah.
I mean, he was just such a patient person, very kind, but also like incredibly technical. Like I just saw him jump from like doing firmware work to server work to like this to that. And it was, and he's someone who didn't have like a formal like CS degree. He just did it. He worked at Intel when he was in high school. I mean, it's just kind of like a very, and I think he just helped me to kind of get over my lingering imposter syndrome. Everyone has it, but it's sort of like, he was just like, yeah, you can do this. Like, and I still talk to him every once in a while, just to catch up. He's a great person.
Yep. Cool. And maybe from him, maybe from someone else, is there a quote that you sometimes find yourself referring back to that keeps you going, guides you, inspires you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's like lots of people who say great things all the time, but in the work context, a quote that my old manager, Zach Brock at Square, also a great person to work with, he had this saying, when I was earlier in my career, I'd get kind of frustrated with like the state of things, and I care a lot about code health and just sort of like operational excellence kind of stuff. And he'd say, like whenever you get frustrated just with a past decision, first, assume that the person making that decision had the best intent given the information at the time. And I think it just brings like humility to the problem, because, it makes you realize, like things are not always easy and straightforward, and people are just doing their best, right? So I think that's an important kind of thing. There's like a human aspect to work, right? Especially in software where it's not very human oriented sometimes. And I think the other important aspect that it sort of made me realize is that like a lot of technology is fungible, and most engineering problems often have several approaches to get there. Like, in fact, the hardest engineering challenges are ones where you're like, I don't know, like there are two options, right? Or three options, and they're all kind of okay right now, but we don't really know. So it's always worth reevaluating like what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I find that like that has helped me be really successful when I sort of ask like, hey, why did we do that? And then people go, oh, I don't really know why we did that. We should change that. And it's like, oh yeah, let's just do something different. So I think just being open to really realizing that like a lot of decisions are made in the moment when they need to, they're not made perfectly all the time. And that's totally fine. I think the other one too that he used to tell me to was like, whenever I started complaining about things, he'd be like, he just would finally say, just fix it. And I'd be like, and it's true. Like, I think at the end of the day, you're always going to be frustrated with stuff, or especially if you care about code health. You just need to go take ownership and fix it. Like, if you see something that's broken, fix it. And I think that like we are trying to do a good job of that here. You can't do that all the time. It's not always perfect. But I think that we tend to give engineers a lot of power in recognizing when they see something broken that they should fix it. And I think that that's like an important cultural thing, because no one at the top is really ever going to see those problems, right? It's the people who do the work every day that have to like think of that, or who like feel the most pain and then feel the most motivated, should feel the most motivated to like go and make it better.
Yep. Those are both wonderful sentiments. Jared, thank you very much for joining me today.